Hey chess people, this is a game from one of my students who had the white pieces. Very normal opening, attacking pawn, defending pawn, bishop on the best diagonal, black does the same. White prepares to take the center with d4, and black plays a bad move, which is d6, he should go knight f6. And then the main line is d4, takes, check. Now, if white was able to maintain his perfect pawn center, black would be in humongous trouble here. But if bishop d2, black can swap and play d5. Now white has to capture this pawn. Black recaptures, and now black's plan is very simple. He's isolated the pawn, so he should blockade it with a move like knight e7, c6, obviously he's going to castle, and he's got a firm blockade in front of this pawn, and that's very important because in the endgame, isolated pawns become very weak, but in the middle game, you often want to advance the isolated pawn because it can be a great attacking force. So black's going to be very safe if he can blockade it. The other move instead of bishop d2 is knight c3, which is walking into a self-pin, but it's perfectly playable and it's probably the best move. Knight takes e4 is the best move for black. Castles because white has a lead in development. If bishop takes c3, the main move is actually d5, and it's complicated. Black decides to play knight takes c3 because he's getting greedy. Pawn takes and bishop takes. Now, black is 2 pawns up. His king has not castled. He's threatening this, and he's covering this square, so he can't go check. And black's threatening to castle as well. So white plays bishop a3, which cuts the king. Black plays d5 to try and shut down this diagonal. And now we pin the knight. And black gets greedy now, which is actually the losing move. Bishop takes rook, so he's technically up 7 points. Check, bishop blocks. Now I just discovered that queen a4, which has actually been played, doesn't win because after queen b8, knight e5, black has this really nice defense, bishop b2. If I switch on the engine, I don't know if you guys can actually see it, but yeah, it's saying 0, 0, 0. So it's actually a drawn position now, surprisingly. But the winning move is actually queen c2, and the difference being that the queen covers the b2 square, so when he has that nice defense, we can take the queen potentially, and then he still can't castle because our bishop's cutting his king. So queen defends the knight, and then knight e5 piling up on the pinned piece. And this is completely over, and white is just winning. One sample line might be to move the queen, and then let's say bishop takes, check, king moves, check, and checkmate, which I believe there's a game that's actually finished like this with a slightly different move order. So if we go back to knight f6, it's definitely the best move, but d6 was played in the game. Now the problem with that is after bishop b4 check, white can play knight c3. And normally, black would be okay because he can play knight takes e4 in this position, just like in the previous example. But now white has this perfect pawn center, which is completely unchallenged. If black goes knight f6, we can simply castle. And if he tries to remove this defender and take, you can see the time that black has actually lost, as in the other variation where he was able to castle if he didn't get greedy on c3. So this is just very, very nice for white. However, my student played bishop d2, which is okay. After bishop takes, we should play queen takes. Now the point being that this is the knight's most natural square, where it attacks 8 squares in the board, and it's putting a lot of pressure in the center. If you play this knight to here, you're only controlling 6 squares, but also you're having no pressure over the d5 square, which is a very important central square in a lot of cases, especially when a knight gets there. White's probably still a tiny bit better though, because we do have these 2 pawns. The game continues very normally. So not much happening. Queen b3, which is a nice move. Attacking this, attacking this. Sometimes this tactic actually works for black, this knight a5 fork, attacking both, because when we move the queen after check, our bishop's unprotected, but the knight on a5 is also unprotected. If we play c5 to protect the knight and attack the queen, so next move we can take the bishop, we take, queen takes f7, pawn takes. And although white has lost a piece, these pawns are going to run down the board like steamrollers. The knight has to move and then we can just keep pushing. Also, this knight isn't much of a knight because it's on the edge of the board. So it's actually winning for white. So in the game it continued like this. And there's a few inaccuracies for white here, but it's okay. Like the first one is queen takes queen. Black is completely lacking development in this position. So I believe you should keep the queens on, especially with this e5 pawn. Anyway, queen takes queen is still winning. But the problem is, when you have an extra pawn in the endgame, it needs support. The further you push it into your opponent's position, the weaker it will become. So if you keep pushing it, it's going to become weak. And black did miss opportunities to draw this game later just because his pawn was so weak and easily picked off with moves like knight g6 or king f7. Back here, white has a really nice position. Both of his rooks are in the middle, just like black's actually. The knight's defending the pawn. Black's hasn't got any threats, but white's king isn't doing anything. So we should bring the king in, because it's the endgame. So you should bring the king. So a move like king h2 makes a lot of sense. And if you think of things in terms of pawn structure as well, black has 3 pawns over here, white has 2. So later on, if this was a king and pawn endgame, black has the potential for an outside passed pawn on the queen side, which would be further away from white's king. But if white's king's activated, then it wouldn't be so dangerous. Also, white's pawns, 1, 2, 3, 4, verse 2. So white has the potential for creating 2 connected passed pawns, which should be formidable. It should just be easily winning for white. We bring the king up and then start pushing the pawns, trade off a pair of rooks, and this should eventually be winning for white. But in the endgame, you have to use the king as quickly as possible, especially in these simple endgames where there isn't many pieces on the board.